Welcome back to the deep dive. I want you to close your eyes for a second and transport yourself back to a very specific time and place. It's November 24th, 1971.
Thanksgiving Eve.
Thanksgiving Eve. You are standing in the terminal at Portland International Airport. The energy is just frantic, families rushing, announcements blaring over the PA system. But visually, it's a totally different world.
Well, completely. The air is thick with cigarette smoke.
Right. And there are no TSA checkpoints, no metal detectors. You could literally walk right up to the gate with a ticket you bought for cash, holding a briefcase that absolutely no one has looked inside.
It really was the quote-unquote golden age of flying, though, maybe naive is a better word for it in hindsight. It was an era that was really built on trust. And on that rainy Wednesday night in the Pacific Northwest, one man was about to exploit that trust in a way that would, well, change aviation history forever.
We are, of course, opening the case file on the only unsolved act of air piracy in commercial aviation history. We are talking about the man the world knows as D.B. Cooper. But as I was digging into the stack of FBI files, all the witness transcripts, and even the geological reports we have for today, the first thing that struck me is how much of the legend is just wrong.
Oh, absolutely.
We think we know this story, but once you start peeling back the layers, you realize the public narrative is barely the tip of the iceberg.
The Cooper case is like the great American Sherlock Holmes mystery, except, the final chapter was torn out of the book. It has everything. A polite villain, a daring escape, baffling physical evidence, and a disappearance so complete it feels almost supernatural.
And our mission today is to go way beyond the Wikipedia summary. We aren't just going to recount the heist. We're going to deconstruct the physics of the flight, the geology of the riverbanks where the money was found, and the high-tech particle analysis done on a clip-on tie 40 years after the fact.
We're going deep.
We're going to look at the suspects with a microscope. But first, we have to clear up the biggest misconception right out of the gate. The name.
Right, because if you ask anyone on the street who hijacked Northwest Orient Flight 305, they will say D.B. Cooper. It's on the T-shirts, it's in the movies, the books, but that man never existed.
This is such a classic example of how a media rush can just rewrite history. The man who walked up to the Northwest Orient counter that night didn't say, "I'm D.B. Cooper." He gave the name Dan Cooper.
Exactly. He bought a one-way ticket to Seattle-Tacoma Airport SeaTac for $20. He paid cash. And he gave the name Dan Cooper. So the question is, where did DB come from?
Well, this is where the pure chaos of the early investigation just kicks in. In the hours immediately following the hijacking, the FBI and the local police, they were scrambling. I mean, they were desperate. They started running background checks on anyone in the Portland area with the last name Cooper who might fit the bill or had a criminal record.
And they found one, a local guy with a minor rap sheet named DB Cooper. They brought him in, they checked him out, and very, very quickly realized he was not their man. He was cleared almost immediately.
But, and this is a huge but, there was a reporter, a guy named James Long, working for the Oregon Journal. He's racing against a printing deadline.
The classic reporter's dilemma.
Exactly. He gets wind of the police looking at this local person of interest, and in his rush, he conflates the hijacker's alias, Dan, with the person of interest, DB.
And once that hit the wire services, specifically United Press International, UPI, it was game over. The story went national with the name D.B. Cooper. And honestly, from a linguistic perspective, D.B. Cooper just sounds more iconic than Dan Cooper.
It does. It sounds like a bandit.
It sounds like a bandit.
Yep.
Dan sounds like your neighbor who borrows your lawnmower. The name stuck, and the hijacker, wherever he ended up, never bothered to correct the record.
So let's look at the man himself. We have the descriptions from the flight attendants and passengers, and this is what fascinates me, the gentleman hijacker persona. Because usually when we picture a hijacker, especially in the volatile political climate of the early 70s, we picture someone aggressive, sweating, maybe screaming political slogans.
Cooper was the polar opposite. He was a white male, mid-40s. He had dark hair, brown eyes, and a swarthy or olive complexion. But it was his attire that really set the tone.
He looked like a businessman.
He was wearing a dark business suit, a white shirt that was freshly pressed, a thin black tie, a black raincoat, and slip-on loafers. He carried a black attaché case. He looked like an executive heading home from a boring meeting.
He sat in seat 18E, which is a middle seat in the rear of the plane. He calmly orders a bourbon and 7-Up. And the witnesses, specifically flight attendant Tina Mucklow, they couldn't stop talking about his demeanor. He was polite, he wasn't nervous, he wasn't cruel.
And that psychological profile is just key. To maintain that level of calm while you are holding a bomb and planning a high-risk parachute jump, It suggests a level of control and compartmentalization that is incredibly rare. This wasn't a man acting on impulse. This was a man who had likely been in high-stress situations before.
So the plane takes off. It's Flight 305, a Boeing 727-100. It's a short hop, right? Portland to Seattle, barely 30 minutes in the air.
A puddle jump.
And just after takeoff, the clock starts ticking. Cooper hands a folded note to Florence Schaffner, the flight attendant who is sitting in the jump seat right near him.
And this is such a perfectly human moment. She ignores it.
Just ignores it.
You have to put yourself in her shoes. It's 1971. She's a young, attractive flight attendant. She is probably used to lonely businessmen hitting on her constantly. She just assumes this is another guy trying to slip her his phone number or hotel room key. She drops it in her purse without even looking.
I love that Cooper had to actually, correct her. He didn't get angry. He didn't snap at her. He just leaned over and whispered.
Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb.
That delivery just chills me to the bone.
Yeah.
It's so matter of fact. It's not a threat screamed across the cabin. It's a piece of advice.
And that changed everything. She opened the note. It was printed in all caps with a felt-tip pen. The exact wording has been lost because Cooper actually took the note back later, but she recalled it saying something like, "Miss, I have a bomb in my briefcase and want you to sit by me."
So she sits down, and this is the moment of truth, right? Is he bluffing? She asks to see the bomb.
And he opens the briefcase, just enough for her to see. And inside, she sees 2 rows of 4 red cylinders. There are wires connecting them and a large cylindrical battery. To her, it looked exactly like dynamite.
Now, in the years since, the FBI and other experts have debated this. Was it real dynamite? Or was it just road flares?
It's a really valid question. Road flares look remarkably like dynamite sticks. They're red cardboard tubes, they're easy to buy, and from a visual standpoint, they would be more than convincing enough to terrify a civilian.
But he was very protective of that briefcase.
Very. He knew exactly how to handle it, so whether it was real or fake, it achieved its purpose, which was absolute compliance.
So Schaffner goes to the cockpit to relay the demands. And let's unpack these, because they are so specific and they tell us a lot about Cooper's planning. First, the money. He wanted $200,000 in negotiable American currency.
Which is a very particular phrasing, isn't it? Negotiable American currency. It implies a familiarity with banking, or maybe international travel, distinguishing it from other currencies.
In today's money, adjusted for inflation, we're talking about roughly $1.6 million.
A significant haul, for sure, but not so large that it would be physically impossible to carry or jump with.
And he wanted it in $20 bills.
Which was smart. 20s are common. They're much easier to pass than hundreds without raising suspicion. But they also add up in weight. 10,000 bills is about 21 pounds. That's not insignificant when you're planning to jump out of a plane.
Then we have the parachutes. This is the detail that I think is the most brilliant piece of game theory in the whole crime. He asked for 4 parachutes.
Right, 4. 2 front parachutes, which are reserves, and 2 back parachutes, the mains. Why 4? He's only one guy.
It was a strategic masterstroke. If he had asked for just 1 parachute, the FBI might have reasoned, he's the only one jumping. Let's give him a sabotage chute. Let's sew it shut.
Let's give him a dummy. But by asking for 4, he created the implication that he might force a hostage, maybe a flight attendant, maybe even a pilot, to jump with him.
Exactly. He forced the authorities to care about the safety of the gear because they couldn't be sure who would be wearing it. They couldn't risk killing a civilian.
It guaranteed him functional equipment. It shows he was thinking several moves ahead of the law enforcement response. It's brilliant.
So the demands are relayed to the ground. The plane can't land immediately because the FBI needs time to get the money and the chutes together. So Flight 305 enters a holding pattern. They are circling Puget Sound for about 2 hours.
And this is where that gentleman persona really gets tested. For 2 hours, he's sitting there with a bomb on his lap. The passengers have no idea what's happening. They've just been told there's a minor mechanical issue delaying the landing.
And Cooper's just chatting with Tina Mucklow, pointing out landmarks.
He knew the geography from the air. He did. He pointed out Tacoma. And he correctly identified that McChord Air Force Base was only a 20-minute drive from SeaTac. This suggests he was very familiar with the Pacific Northwest, possibly as a pilot or someone who flew the route often.
And then we have the cowboy incident. This is one of those details that you just can't make up.
It adds such a bizarre texture to the whole event. There was a passenger apparently wearing a cowboy hat who was getting really restless.
He has no idea. He's a few rows away from a man with a bomb.
Zero clue. He kept getting up, harassing Tina Mucklow, demanding to know why they weren't landing. Cooper watched this for a while, and the accounts say he was initially sort of amused by the guy's complete lack of situational awareness.
But then his patience wore thin.
Yeah, it did. He basically told the guy to sit down and shut up.
But he didn't pull a gun. He didn't reveal the bomb.
No. He maintained cover. Eventually, another passenger calmed the cowboy down. But can you imagine being that guy the next day, reading the newspaper and realizing you were annoying a hijacker holding dynamite?
Oh my God. So finally, the logistics are sorted. The MPI gets the money from Seattle First National Bank, 10,000 unmarked bills, although they frantically microfilmed all the serial numbers. They get the parachutes from a local skydiving school and a stunt pilot. The plane finally lands at SeaTac at 5:46 p.m.
And Cooper dictates the terms of the landing. He wants the plane parked in a remote, partially lit section of the tarmac. He demands the window shades be drawn so snipers can't get a bead on him, and he allows only one person to approach the aircraft.
Al Lee, the Northwest Operations Manager.
Right. And Lee had to approach in civilian clothes. Cooper was very, very wary of uniformed police. Lee brings the money and the parachutes up the aft stairs.
And Cooper keeps his word. He releases the passengers.
All 36 passengers get off. They still don't really know what's happening until they see the police swarm around them on the tarmac. He also releases flight attendants Florence Schaffner and Alice Hancock.
But he keeps the pilots, Scott, Radizak, and Anderson, and he keeps Tina Mucklow on board.
Well, he needed the flight crew to fly the plane, obviously. And he seemed to have developed a rapport, a trust with Mucklow. He needed her to help manage the cabin and the door. But before the others left, Cooper did something that just perfectly encapsulates the surreal nature of this crime. He tried to tip them.
With the ransom money?
No, with his own money. He pulled out a wad of his own bills and tried to give the flight attendants a gratuity for their service during the hijacking.
And they turned him down.
Tina Mucklow actually told him, "No, sir, company policy forbids tipping." I mean, even in the midst of a felony hostage situation, the adherence to protocol was just absolute.
That's incredible. Okay, so the passengers are safe. The plane is refueled. Now the mission shifts completely. It's no longer a hostage negotiation. It's an escape plan. Cooper calls the cockpit and gives them a very specific flight plan. And this is where we need to get technical, because Cooper knew things about the Boeing 727 that the average person simply did not know.
He absolutely did. First, he told the pilots he wanted to fly southeast toward Mexico City. Now, the crew immediately told him that was impossible. A fully loaded 727, especially flying that low and slow, just burns fuel at a tremendous rate. They couldn't make it to Mexico.
So they negotiated.
They did. They agreed on a refueling stop in Reno, Nevada.
But it was the configuration of the plane that's so telling. Break down what he asked for.
He demanded they fly at the minimum airspeed possible without stalling. That's approximately 100 knots, so about 115 miles per hour. He wanted the altitude capped at 10,000 feet. He wanted the landing gear deployed. He wanted the wing flaps set to 15 degrees. And the most important piece, he demanded the cabin remain unpressurized.
Why unpressurized? This is the key physics question, isn't it?
It is. It's all about the door. The Boeing 727 has a ventral airstair, a staircase that lowers from the tail of the plane. It's what's called a plug door. If the cabin is pressurized, the pressure inside is greater than the pressure outside, and that force literally seals the door shut. You physically cannot open it in flight.
So by keeping the plane at 10,000 feet and unpressurized, the pressure is equalized.
Exactly. And that allows the door to be unlatched and lowered while they're in the air.
And the flaps and landing gear, what's the point of those?
Those all add drag. They help stabilize the plane at those incredibly low speeds. If you try to lower a staircase into a 500-mile-per-hour slipstream, it might just rip off or damage the tail. By flying at 100 knots with all that drag, he created a relatively stable platform to jump from.
Did the average civilian or even the average pilot know that the 727 airstair could open in flight?
No, absolutely not. There were no exit signs pointing to it for passengers, but the CIA and the military knew. In Vietnam, they used unmarked 727's Air America flights to drop supplies and agents into Laos and Cambodia using that exact airstair method. The fact that Cooper knew this specific vulnerability suggests he had inside knowledge. Maybe he was a veteran, maybe he was CIA, or maybe he worked for Boeing.
So the plane takes off again around 7:40 p.m. It's pitch black. It's raining. They're heading south toward Reno. Cooper sends Tina Mucklow to the cockpit.
He tells her to go into the cockpit and lock the door. She begs him one last time, "Please, take the bomb with you." And he tells her he will either disarm it or take it with him. The last thing she sees is Cooper standing in the aisle, tying the money bag to his waist.
And there was a snag with that money bag, wasn't there?
Yes, he had apparently asked for the money in a knapsack, But the bank delivered it in a canvas bank bag with handles, not something you can easily strap to your back for a parachute jump. He was visibly annoyed by this.
So he had to improvise.
He did. He took one of the reserve parachutes, cut the shroud lines off the canopy, and used those heavy-duty cords to lash the money bag to his body.
So Mucklow was in the cockpit. The pilots are basically wrestling with this heavy, drag-laden plane, and they aren't alone up there in the sky.
No, the Air Force had scrambled 2 F-106 fighters and a T-33 trainer from McCord to tail the airliner.
But could they see him? Could they see anything?
Nothing. It was a logistical nightmare for the fighter jets. A 727 flying at 100 knots is incredibly slow for a supersonic fighter. The jets had to fly these wide S-turns just to stay behind it without stalling out themselves.
And the weather.
Plus, the cloud cover was dense, and it was night. They were instructed to stay below and behind the airliner to remain in Cooper's blind spot. But effectively, they were blind too. They saw absolutely nothing.
So we're at 8 p.m. A warning light flashes in the cockpit.
The aft airstair open light. The pilots get on the intercom. They ask, "Is everything okay back there? Is there anything we can do for you?"
And Cooper replies,
"No." Just that one word. It was the last communication anyone ever had with him.
Then at 8:13 p.m., the physics of the plane tells the rest of the story.
The crew felt a significant pressure bump. Their ears popped. But more importantly, the pilots felt the trim change. See, when a 200-pound man plus 21 pounds of cash plus a heavy parachute walks to the extreme rear of the plane, the center of gravity shifts backward. The pilots have to trim the nose down to compensate for that.
And when he jumps,
that weight disappears instantly. The center of gravity snaps forward. The tail pitches up violently because the elevators are still trimmed for the heavy tail. The pilots had to fight the yoke to level the plane again. That specific oscillation at 8:13 p.m. marks the exact second D.B. Cooper left the aircraft.
They were over the Lewis River area north of Portland.
In a freezing rainstorm at 10,000 feet.
The plane lands in Reno a couple hours later with the airstair actually dragging on the runway, throwing up sparks. The FBI storms the plane. But Cooper is gone. The bomb is gone. The money is gone.
And the investigation begins. I mean, it was massive. They searched the flight path with helicopters, with ground troops. They even used the SR-71 Blackbird spy plane to retrace the route and photograph the ground.
Didn't they use a submarine too?
They used a submarine to search the bottom of Lake Merwin, thinking he might have landed in the water, and the heavy money bag dragged him down to bottom.
But for all that incredible effort, they found nothing on the ground. Not for years. However, Cooper did leave some things behind on the plane. And this brings us to the forensic evidence, which has gotten so much more interesting in the last decade or so.
Oh, yeah. He left behind a black clip-on tie from JCPenney. He left 8 cigarette butts in the armrest ashtray. And he left 2 of the 4 parachutes on a seat.
Okay, let's talk about the cigarette butts first, because this is a source of major heartbreak for modern investigators.
It is an absolute tragedy. Cooper smoked Raleigh filter tips. He chain-smoked during the flight. Those butts would be covered in his saliva, a perfect source for DNA. A slam dunk in today's world. But the FBI Las Vegas field office, at some point over the decades, just destroyed them. They're gone.
Ugh. They lost the best chance at a genetic ID.
The best chance. Gone forever.
But we still have the tie.
Yeah.
And in 2009, a group of scientists and these citizen sleuths got permission from the FBI to analyze it using modern technology.
This is where it gets really fascinating. They used a scanning electron microscope, an S. They basically lifted thousands of microscopic particles off the tie with sticky tape and then blasted them with electrons to see what they were made of.
And the results were incredibly specific.
Extremely specific. They found particles of pure, unalloyed titanium. They found antimony. They found cerium and strontium sulfide.
Okay, contextualize that for us. In 1971, was titanium a common thing?
No. Today, you have titanium in your golf clubs and your laptop frame. In 1971, it was a strategic metal. It was used almost exclusively in high-end aerospace fabrication or military projects. This wasn't something you'd encounter in daily life.
So this tells us Cooper wasn't a florist or a grocer.
No, he was a company man. He wore a tie to work in a facility where titanium dust was literally in the air. The specific mix of aluminum and titanium they found matches the alloys used in Boeing's supersonic transport, the SST project, which had just been canceled right before the hijacking.
And the other elements.
The cerium and strontium sulfide are used in the manufacturing of cathode ray tubes, the old-style screens for radar or televisions. This points to companies like Tektronix in Oregon or, again, Boeing in Seattle.
So the tie just screams, Pacific Northwest tech worker. Now, let's look at the parachutes. He took 2, he left 2, but the ones he took, there's a massive red flag here, isn't there?
A huge one. He took the Navy backpack chute as his main,
Hmm.
but for his reserve, the chest chute, he selected one that was actually a dummy.
Explain what a dummy chute is.
It's a training aid. It's used in classrooms to teach students how to strap on the harness. It looks like a real parachute on the outside, but has no canopy inside. The container is sewn shut. You cannot open it. It's non-functional.
Would an experienced skydiver make that mistake?
An experienced skydiver checks their gear. It's the first rule of the sport. You check your pins, you check your ripcord, you check your pilot chute. The fact that he grabbed the dummy suggests either he didn't know how to check, or he was in such a rush he just grabbed the wrong one.
Or there's another theory.
Or he knew it was a dummy. Remember the money bag problem? Some investigators theorize he realized the dummy chute was useless as a parachute, so he deliberately cut it open to use the empty container to better secure the money, since the bank bag was so unwieldy.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. Now let's move to the evidence found outside the plane. For years, this was a complete ghost story. Then in 1980, we get the biggest break in the entire case.
The Tina Bar money. February 1980. An 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram is vacationing with his family on the Columbia River at a sandy beachfront called Tina Bar, and he's digging a fire pit in the sand to roast hot dogs.
And he hits pay dirt.
Literally.
He unearths 3 bundles of cash. They are rotting, black, and matted together, but the serial numbers are legible. It's $5,800 of the Cooper ransom money.
This confirmed the money left the plane, but the location was weird, right? It didn't quite fit. It was incredibly confusing. Tina Bar is miles upstream from the generally accepted drop zone. The natural flow of the river shouldn't have deposited there unless it washed down from a tributary, which is possible. But recently, science has thrown another curveball at us: the diatoms.
I love this part. This is real CSI stuff. Explain what diatoms are.
Diatoms are microscopic algae. They have hard silica shells that act like glass. They don't decay. Different species of diatoms bloom at different times of the year. A private researcher got permission to analyze the diatoms that were embedded in the fibers of the found money.
And they found spring diatoms.
Specifically, Asterianella formosa, a species that blooms in the spring. But the hijacking was in late November. If the money had landed in the river on the night of the jump, it should have been covered in winter diatoms. The presence of spring algae implies that the money stayed dry, perhaps buried on a riverbank or stuck in a tree for months, and only entered the water during the spring thaw or a flood season.
So that completely challenges the theory that he landed, lost the money in the river immediately, and drowned. It suggests the money was on land for quite a while.
Exactly. It keeps the survival theory very much alive.
Which leads us perfectly to the profile. Who was this guy? Was he a master criminal? Was he an expert skydiver?
The FBI profile shifted over the years. Initially, they thought expert skydiver, but the skydiving community pushed back hard on that. They basically said, no expert jumps at night in the rain into a forest wearing loafers and a trench coat. That's not skill, that's suicide.
Right, he didn't have a helmet, he didn't have boots, no protective gear at all.
The wind chill at 10,000 feet doing 115 miles an hour would have been well below zero. His suit would have been flapping violently. He would have been freezing and effectively blind. So the consensus shifted to him being maybe a paratrooper dropout or a cargo loader, someone who had seen parachutes used, maybe kicked cargo out of planes in Vietnam, but wasn't a recreational jumper himself.
But he was definitely aviation savvy.
Undeniably. He knew the flap settings, the fuel burn, the airstair mechanics. He was comfortable in an airplane. He knew what he was doing in that specific environment.
So the million-dollar question, did he survive the jump?
The no camp says. It's impossible. He landed in dense forest in the pitch black. If he didn't freeze to death on the way down, he probably impaled himself on a Douglas fir on the way in. Plus, and this is the big one, none of the money was ever spent. The FBI circulated the serial numbers to every bank, every casino, every racetrack in the world. Not a single bill ever popped up. Criminals steal money to spend it. If he lived, why didn't he spend a single dime?
But the yes camp points to the copycats.
And this is a very, very strong argument. 1972 was basically the year of the parachute hijacker. 5 months after Cooper, a man named Richard McCoy did the exact same thing. He jumped from 727 over Utah, and he survived.
Martin Galley did it. Frederick Kahneman did it.
All of them jumped from 727s in similar conditions, and all of them survived the jump, so it proves that mechanically the jump was survivable. Difficult, yes, but not impossible.
Okay, let's put the suspects on trial. The FBI looked at over 1,000 people. But there are a few all-stars that always come up. Let's start with Richard McCoy.
The real McCoy. He is the favorite for many people. He was a Green Beret, a helicopter pilot in Vietnam, and an avid skydiver. His hijacking of United Flight 855 was almost a carbon copy of Cooper's. He demanded $500,000. He jumped from the aft stairs. He survived.
So why isn't it him?
Two main reasons. First, the alibi. On Thanksgiving Day, the day after the Cooper jump, McCoy was having dinner with his family in Utah. It's a very tight timeline to get from the Washington woods to Utah in 24 hours without a car or a flight. And second, the physical description. McCoy had a lisp. He had very prominent ears. The flight attendants from the Cooper flight looked at McCoy's picture and said, "No, that's not him." Cooper was described as suave. McCoy was a bit rougher around the edges.
What about Robert Rackstraw? He was the subject of that big documentary a few years back.
Rackstraw checks a lot of boxes. He was a Vietnam vet, a pilot, he had explosives knowledge, a criminal record, and he looked a bit like the sketch. But again, age is the big issue. Rackstraw was only 28 in 1971. Cooper was consistently described by multiple witnesses as being in his mid-40s. That is a hard age gap to fake.
That's a big difference.
And Rackstraw loved attention. He was a showman. Cooper was disciplined, quiet, and anonymous.
Then there's Sheridan Peterson.
Now, this is my personal favorite suspect, statistically speaking. Peterson was a smoke jumper. I mean, he literally jumped out of planes into forests to fight fires. He worked at Boeing as a technical editor. He knew the planes inside and out. He was 44 years old in 1971, and he looked exactly like the composite sketch.
So what's the problem? He sounds perfect.
The DNA. The FBI tested his DNA against the partial profile they developed from the tie. It was not a match. Now, you can argue the tie might not have been Cooper's. Maybe he bought it at a thrift store and it had someone else's DNA on it. But if you trust the evidence, Peterson is out.
And Kenneth Christensen, the airline employee.
Yeah, he was a purser for Northwest Orient. He knew the crew, he knew the procedures, he was a former paratrooper, he bought a house with cash shortly after the hijacking, but he was 5'8" and about 150 pounds. Cooper was described as 5'10" to 6' and 180 pounds. The physical size mismatch is pretty significant.
There is one cultural theory that I find fascinating because it's just so obscure. The comic book connection.
Oh, the Dan Cooper comics. This is a brilliant bit of lateral thinking. In Belgium and France, there was a very popular comic book series called Dan Cooper. The hero was a test pilot for the Royal Canadian Air Force.
And what does Dan Cooper do in these comics?
He has all sorts of adventures in jets, and in one issue that was released right around the time of the hijacking, the cover art depicts him parachuting.
But these comics weren't sold in the U.S.
No, they weren't, which suggests the hijacker might have been Canadian or perhaps an American serviceman who was stationed in Europe and read them. And that aligns with that strange negotiable American currency phrasing. That sounds like a Canadian specifying the type of dollar they want, doesn't it?
It does. So we have a potential Canadian aerospace worker or ex-military man who knows the 727 intimately. That narrows the field, but not enough to find him.
Exactly. It's a profile, not a person.
As we wrap up, we really have to look at the legacy. Because even if D.B. Cooper is just a skeleton in the woods, he absolutely changed the world.
He ended the innocence of air travel. The Cooper vane was installed on every Boeing 727 in the fleet. It's a simple spring-loaded paddle on the outside of the fuselage. If the plane is on the ground, a spring holds it open so you can use the stairs. But in flight, the 500-mile-an-hour wind pushes the paddle flat, which physically locks the door from the outside. You cannot open the airstair in flight anymore because of him.
In airport security.
Cooper and the wave of copycats he inspired forced the FAA to act. By 1973, we had mandatory baggage inspection and metal detectors at every airport in the country. The modern airport experience, taking off your shoes, scanning your laptop, all of that traces its lineage directly back to Dan Cooper.
In 2016, the FBI officially suspended the active investigation. They released the files, all 66 volumes, to the public.
They finally realized they were burning taxpayer money hunting a ghost who was, in all likelihood, long dead. But by releasing the files, they kind of crowdsourced the cold case. Yeah. The citizen sleuths, the CooperCon attendees, they're the ones doing the particle analysis and the diatom research now.
I want to leave you with a final thought on the motive. We always assume it was about greed. But remember what he told Tina Mucklow on the plane. I don't have a grudge against your airline. I just have a grudge.
Connect that to the titanium on the tie. Connect that to what was called the Boeing bust.
In 1971, the aerospace industry in Seattle was absolutely collapsing. Boeing laid off 60,000 people. There's a famous billboard in Seattle that said, Will the last person leaving Seattle please turn out the lights?
So imagine Cooper is one of those men, a middle-aged engineer or a tech worker. He's given his life to the company. He's an expert on these complex systems, and then he's just tossed aside.
Maybe this wasn't just a robbery. Maybe it was a severance package. Or maybe it was a way to use his very specific niche knowledge to embarrass the system that had rejected him.
He exploited a mechanical flaw that only an insider would know. He didn't hurt anyone. He was polite, and he vanished. In a way, he regained control over a life that felt completely out of his control.
And he never spent the money. Maybe the money was never the point. Maybe the act itself, the perfect execution, was the satisfaction.
It's the ultimate middle finger to the industry. And if he did survive, he didn't need the cash to feel like a winner. He walked away with the secret.
So somewhere in the Pacific Northwest, maybe the trees are growing over a skeleton and a disintegrating bag of cash. Or maybe, just maybe, an old man is sitting on a porch watching a 737 fly over, knowing he's the reason the cockpit door is locked solid.
I personally think the woods took him. But I understand why we all want him to have made it. We love a gentle outlaw.
If you want to fall down this rabbit hole yourself, the FBI files are all online now. Look at the tide particles, look at the maps, and decide for yourself.
But maybe don't go digging up the Columbia River. I think the FBI has been there enough.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll see you on the next flight.
Safe travels.